Welcome to the Sacred Journey podcast. I'm Elizabeth Marth Tarara, and I'm a certified conscious uncoupling and calling in the one coach, as well as a certified spiritual and emotional growth coach. And my purpose in this podcast is to shift the perspective on midlife changes being something of a crisis to the truth that they are a beautiful opportunity to awaken and a necessary part of our life's journey. I specialize in walking with women who are experiencing disconnect from themselves and who are facing life-changing experiences. And as hard as these situations can be, there is still the truth that these painful times can be the catalyst that can change our lives for the better. Change is what ignites the desire deep within us to reconnect to our true selves and our true divine purpose. It moves us to step up and live the lives we are being called to live, reclaiming yourself and reclaiming your life. So if you are hearing the call to walk this journey, keep listening, because I promise this is going to be good. And remember, life is all about the journey, not the destination. Hello, and welcome to the Sacred Journey podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Marth Tarara, and we are doing the second episode of the Abandonment series. Today, I am going to be discussing anger and how women can show up in self-abandonment around the subject of anger. I think that anger is a very controversial, even if unspoken about, emotion for women to have. We are taught from a young age, often, not all of us, but a lot of us, that anger is bad. That anger is even a sin in some beliefs, and that we are not to have anger, or we are bad. There can be a lot of shame around anger, and what happens with that, we then begin to push it down. So whether that shows up in avoidance, whether that shows up in denial, which could be, the same things, denying a feeling of anger in a given situation. I have had a lot of experience with self-abandonment in the anger department because I come from a family in which anger was one of the main emotions. And one of the things I wanted to discuss today was the difference in the types of anger. The two specifically today I want to address is punitive anger and righteous anger. Punitive anger is more of a harmful, hurtful anger, when we want to make someone else hurt because we're hurting. A punishing anger, to make someone realize what they did, that they are wrong and they need to be taught a lesson or punished for it. There's validation in an action and a consequence. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm really talking more about abusive, toxic, dysfunctional, explosive, not done in a healthy communication way, where someone basically ends up feeling like shit. And really, both people do, because even in the most toxic, dysfunctional situations, the person who is acting in that anger at some point feels bad about it generally. This was the type of anger that I grew up in. So I learned that I didn't like anger. It scared me. So it was a scary emotion. It was an emotion that I didn't want to see in other people. And if I saw it, I would want to please and make it all better, because that was how I would stay safe. I saw anger as being a very unsafe emotion. And from a little girl, as we all do, as for our little ones, we want to protect them. And so staying away from anger was my first go-to. The other side of that was I then started to self-abandon in the way that I would ignore my anger so much and repress it and push it down, that when it did come out, it came out sideways and I didn't have control over it. That's the other thing about punitive anger, is it's not something that we generally have control over. We can self-abandon so often our feelings of anger because we don't know that there is another way to do anger. We don't realize that anger is an emotion that is so empowering and powerful for the good, in the direction of creating good for ourselves and creating good for others. Anger is an emotion, and all of our emotions happen because they are trying to show us something, tell us something. There is wisdom in them and there is growth in them. There is no really good or bad emotion, in my belief. It's just information. And emotions are just energy. They are sensations that flow through our body that we have given names to, that some feel good and some don't. Righteous anger is a beautiful thing. Righteous anger is what changes the world. And when I started doing shadow work with my wonderful coach and mentor, Debbie Holcomb, I began to learn that there's a different way. Like, anger doesn't have to be scary and it doesn't have to be unsafe, and people don't have to get hurt. When we actually own our anger and allow ourselves to fully step into our anger in a safe way, it's life-changing. I had a lot of anger that I needed to allow up so that I was no longer self-abandoning, because when we don't use anger as an emotion, we lose a part of ourselves. We become numb. It can be said that depression is anger turned inward. So we just start to disassociate. We start to not care, because anger is passion. Anger is life. There's this image that Debbie would always share of like this jug. And if we can take the top of anger off, all of the other emotions are there. I've come to believe that punitive anger, that blaming, shaming, harmful anger, can be a primal first emotion. It's like our go-to. It's like our impulse. It's like it hits us. But when we grow in consciousness and we grow in awareness, we can step into our observing self and understand that we aren't our emotions, and we can use our tools, whether it's journaling, whether it is meditation, to then bring us to a righteous anger so that we can get the wisdom and the gold and listen to what our anger is trying to tell us, which is always that there needs to be a change and that there needs to be a boundary set. The other part of that is with anger that we need to vent it. So when we are crossing the threshold from a punitive, angry state and we go into the wiser part of us, observing part of us, that we are not our anger, and we take a few deep breaths, what I have learned to do is use my tools of venting. And I'm going to share those with you, because anger is an energy that needs to be released. It needs to get out of our body. It's a vibrating energy, and it can show up when people are like, I'm so angry, my head feels like it's going to explode, right? It can. That is a literal feeling in which anger can show up, or anger can show up in our throat, like we're being strangled and we can't get it out because we feel like we can't say what we need to say, or that we can't be on our truth. We feel like we're being stifled or shut down. It's a really disempowering feeling. So when we can move through that anger, it brings us back to empowerment. I love to go for a run when I'm angry. I love to feel my feet stomping on the ground. Music that gets my energy out and I can breathe heavy. Other ways to get our anger out, that energy to move that first, is to, in a safe place with no one that is going to be hurt by it, scream into a pillow, scream outside if you're by yourself where no one will hear you. Getting it out through your voice is also really important. Our throat chakra is our truth. And when we feel that our truth isn't being heard, it can cause anger. And being able to scream helps unblock that energy. Also in safe containers, which is like a safe environment with people who are schooled in anger management or holding, hitting a pillow with some sort of object, even if it's your fists, hitting the floor, stomping, moving, getting it out of your body. I think you get my point. It's after this that we are able to enter more of an observing mind, more of our wise mind. And it's now that we can journal and go quiet and get within and ask what our anger is trying to tell us. It is something. It is protective energy. It is standing up for injustice, standing up for those who can't speak for themselves, standing up for you. It might be a very new thing for you to step into your empowered feminine anger and share, communicate what isn't okay, saying no, being in a boundary place, being in a grounded place, being in a queenly energy of knowing that you are a creation of the divine. It's being empowered, that you are deserving of being able to feel safe. You are deserving of being able to feel heard. You are deserving of being able to feel as if what you say matters and that you're listened to and that your no is no. This takes practice. For me, anyway. I am still working on my relationship with anger. I am still learning about anger and go between punitive anger and righteous anger. I don't know that punitive anger is where I act from anymore, even though there's instances the other way, punitive anger that might not be as noticeably toxic, except it's toxic internal, is when we are blaming or shaming others. So I know that if I'm blaming someone else or I'm shaming someone else in my mind, that I need to check myself. Like, oh, no. What is my part in this? Actually, because we always have a part, even if it's giving away our power and not stepping into our righteous anger, that's our part. So what is our part in it, and how can I actually step into my empowered anger? Am I being called to take an action, or am I being called to just look at what the situation is trying to tell me? What can I change within myself, or what can I change externally? What boundary needs to be set within myself, or what boundary needs to be set externally? When we begin to look at our relationship with anger and deal, even if we spend most of our time when anger shows up, if it's mostly punitive, that's okay. We get to change that. We get to recognize that. We get to build our awareness. There's so many beautiful books about anger because it's not necessarily talked about, especially with women, especially if you come from a conservative religious background. There can be a lot of confusing messages in that way. If you are interested in learning more about your anger, reach out, have a discovery call. Anger is actually a beautiful thing when we use it in the right way, just like any of our emotions. There's light and shadow to everything. When we step into the righteous anger, the light anger, that's when changes happen. That's when the world changes for ourselves, for our loved ones, and for everyone else. I hope this has been helpful. I look forward to speaking with you next week. I'm still part of the abandonment series. We'll see what comes up for our next week's topic. Have a great week. Take care.
Thanks so much for joining me to explore this midlife journey together. Join me next week as we continue to seek within ourselves to find what we are really looking for, so we can awaken to all the bountiful possibilities that life provides, and then align with the beautiful energy of love within each of us. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. All of the info is in the show notes. And you can check out my website, sacredfreedom.life, where I have my blog, videos, book reviews, meditations, and more. And if you feel so inclined, you can book a complimentary discovery call with me to learn about how you can work with me on your own journey of awakening. See you next week.